Hello, my dear friends. My name is Aditya, and today I want to share with you a story that is not just a part of my life, but the part that defines me. I am 29 years old, a software engineer by profession, and currently living in Bangalore. Life has been kind to me in many ways. Good job, caring family, loyal friends. But there's a chapter of my life that no success could ever replace. It's about her. Her name is Mira. She was the love of my life, my muse, and my greatest lesson. Mira was 27 when we met, working as a primary school teacher in a small town called Mysore. She had a smile that could light up the darkest corners of anyone's soul and a voice that felt like poetry. Her world was simple, yet beautiful, filled with the innocence of children she taught and the dreams she nurtured for them. Unlike the fast-paced, technology-driven life I lived, her days were slow and meaningful. And that contrast between us was what drew me to her in the first place. Let me tell you how it all began. It was the summer of 2021, a time when I was running on autopilot, caught up in endless deadlines and work pressure. My family had been pestering me to take a break, to go on a trip and unwind. After weeks of resisting, I finally gave in. My parents suggested Mysore, not too far from Bangalore, and known for its serene charm and rich history. I reluctantly agreed, thinking it would just be another weekend getaway. Little did I know that trip would change my life forever. I met Mira on the second day of my trip. I had wandered into a quaint little cafe near the palace, looking for a quiet spot to sip coffee and escape the world for a bit. The cafe was almost empty, except for a girl sitting by the window, engrossed in a book. She wore a simple white kurta, her hair tied back in a loose braid, and her eyes, those deep, soulful eyes, were scanning the pages with an intensity that made everything else in the room fade into the background. Something about her caught my attention. Maybe it was the way she seemed lost in her own world, or perhaps it was the faint smile playing on her lips as she read. I couldn't help but stare for a moment longer than I should have, and then, as if sensing my gaze, she looked up. Our eyes met, and for a split second, time seemed to stand still. Feeling awkward, I quickly looked away and pretended to focus on the menu. But to my surprise, she smiled. A warm, inviting smile that made my heart skip a beat. Gathering all the courage I could muster, I decided to approach her. I don't know what came over me, but something told me I had to talk to her. "Hi," I said, trying to sound casual. "I noticed you're reading The Kite Runner. It's one of my favorites." She looked up, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "Really? It's such a powerful book. I just started it, but I'm already hooked." And just like that, a conversation began. We talked about books, life, and everything in between. I learned that she loved reading stories that tugged at her heartstrings, that she adored her job as a teacher, and that she believed in the simple joys of life, like watching the sunset or listening to the rain. In those few hours, it felt like I had known her forever. Over the next few days, we kept meeting. Sometimes it was for coffee, sometimes for a walk around the lake, and sometimes just to sit and talk. She had a way of making even the most ordinary moments feel extraordinary. And before I knew it, I had fallen for her, hard, but love, as beautiful as it is, often comes with its challenges. Mira had her own fears and insecurities. She had lost her father at a young age and had been the pillar of strength for her mother and younger brother ever since. She was fiercely independent, yet she carried the weight of her responsibilities with a quiet grace. Our worlds were so different. I lived in a bustling city, surrounded by technology and a fast-paced lifestyle, while she thrived in the simplicity of her small town. And yet, we found a connection that felt unshakable. The turning point in our story came when I had to return to Bangalore. The thought of leaving her behind was unbearable, but we both knew we had to face reality. Long-distance relationships are never easy, and ours was no exception. There were days when we struggled, when misunderstandings crept in, and when the distance felt like an insurmountable wall between us. As much as we held on to hope, life started throwing challenges at us that neither of us had anticipated. A few months after I returned to Bangalore, my work became even more demanding. I was promoted to lead a high-profile project which, while exciting, consumed every ounce of my time and energy. Late nights at the office turned into early mornings, and before I knew it, days would pass without Mira and I having a proper conversation. She, on the other hand, was dealing with challenges of her own. Her younger brother, Rohan, had recently graduated and was struggling to find a job. Mira felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility to support him and her mother. While she never explicitly said it, I could sense the pressure building in her voice during our calls. Despite it all, she would always say, "We'll get through this, Aditya, together." But the cracks in our relationship started to show. Misunderstandings became more frequent. There were days when I missed her calls because I was stuck in meetings or too exhausted to talk, and days when she wouldn't respond to my messages because she was dealing with her own battles. The physical distance between us amplified every small argument, and for the first time, I felt like I was losing her. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I received a message from her that stopped me in my tracks. "Aditya, can we talk? I think we need to figure out where this is going." My heart sank. I knew what was coming, but I wasn't ready to face it. That night, we had one of the most difficult conversations of my life. Mira, as always, spoke with honesty and clarity. "Aditya," she said, her voice trembling, "I love you. I always will. But I feel like we're drifting apart. It's not your fault or mine. It's just the circumstances. I can't be in a relationship where we're constantly fighting against time, distance, and everything else. It's starting to hurt more than it brings joy." I begged her to reconsider, to hold on a little longer. "Mira, please," I said, my voice breaking. "We can make this work. I'll try harder, I promise. Don't give up on us." But Mira, wise beyond her years, said something that has stayed with me ever since. "Aditya, love isn't just about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting go, even when it hurts, if it means giving each other the chance to heal and grow. Maybe, someday, our paths will cross again. But for now, we need to let each other go." And just like that, she walked out of my life. I was devastated. The weeks that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and endless questions. I replayed every moment we shared, trying to figure out where we went wrong. But deep down, I knew she was right. We had tried our best, but sometimes love alone isn't enough. Months turned into years. I buried myself in work, trying to fill the void she had left. I dated a few people, but no one came close to what Mira and I had shared. Every time I saw something that reminded me of her, a book we had discussed, a song we had loved, it felt like a fresh wound. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. It was a crisp winter morning in December 2023. I was in Mysore again, this time for a business meeting. After the meeting, I decided to visit the same cafe where I had met Mira, partly out of nostalgia and partly because I still clung to the hope of seeing her again. As I walked in, my heart skipped a beat. There she was, sitting by the same window, looking as radiant as ever. She was reading a book, just like she had been the first time we met. For a moment I froze. A part of me wanted to turn around and leave, afraid of reopening old wounds. But another part of me, perhaps the part that never stopped loving her, compelled me to walk toward her. "Mira," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked up, and when her eyes met mine, I saw a mixture of surprise, joy, and something else, something I couldn't quite place. "Aditya," she said, her voice trembling. I can't believe it's you." We sat down, and for the first time in years, we talked. Really talked. She told me about her life, how she had moved to Bangalore to support her brother, who had finally found a job and was thriving. She had also started a small initiative to teach underprivileged children, a dream she had always talked about but never had the chance to pursue before. After that unforgettable reunion, life felt as if it had finally come full circle. Mira and I didn't rush into decisions. We took our time to rebuild the trust and connection that had once been the cornerstone of our relationship. We talked for hours about our past, our dreams, and even the mistakes we made along the way. It was cathartic, healing, and most importantly, it reminded us why we had fallen in love in the first place. One evening, a few weeks after our reunion, we found ourselves walking along the Mysore Palace, lit up in all its glory. The air was cool, and the faint sound of classical music played in the distance. Mira was holding my hand, her fingers intertwined with mine, and I couldn't help but marvel at how surreal it all felt. "Do you remember the last time we were here?" I asked, glancing at her. She smiled, her eyes sparkling with memories. "Of course. You were trying to impress me with random facts about the palace, but you got half of them wrong." I laughed, shaking my head. "And you corrected me every time. I should have known then that you'd always keep me grounded." Mira stopped walking and turned to face me. "Aditya," she began, her voice soft but firm, "I don't regret anything that happened between us, even the painful parts. They brought us here, to this moment, and I wouldn't trade it for anything." Hearing those words, I realized just how much she had grown, how much we both had. The pain of our separation had shaped us, but it hadn't defined us. Instead, it had prepared us for a love that was deeper, stronger, and more enduring than before. As the months passed, we slowly began to weave our lives together. Mira moved to Bangalore permanently, and we rented a small apartment in Indiranagar. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. A space filled with laughter, love, and the occasional argument about whose turn it was to do the dishes. She continued her work with underprivileged children, and I supported her in every way I could, whether it was helping her design lesson plans or attending fundraisers for her initiative. Seeing her so passionate about her work made me fall in love with her all over again. She had a way of bringing light into even the darkest corners of the world. Meanwhile, my career also reached new heights. I was promoted to a senior position, which came with its own set of challenges, but Mira was always there to remind me to take breaks and prioritize what truly mattered. We learned to balance our individual aspirations with our shared dreams, and it was a lesson that strengthened our bond even further. The proposal wasn't a grand, elaborate affair. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning as we sat on the balcony of our apartment, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise. I didn't have a ring, a speech, or even a plan. All I had was an overwhelming sense of certainty that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. "Mira," I said, breaking the comfortable silence. She looked at me, her eyebrows raised in curiosity. "I don't have a big speech prepared, and this isn't exactly the most romantic setting, but will you marry me?" For a moment, she just stared at me, her eyes wide with surprise. Then, a smile spread across her face and she nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, Aditya. 1,000 times yes." We hugged, laughed, and cried all at once, and in that moment, I knew we had everything we needed. Love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about the small, everyday acts of kindness, understanding, and commitment that make a life together meaningful. Our wedding was a simple yet beautiful affair. We decided to hold it in Mysore, the place where our story had both begun and been reborn. Surrounded by our closest friends and family, we exchanged vows under a canopy of flowers, promising to love and support each other through all of life's ups and downs. As we stood there, hand in hand, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought us to this moment, for the lessons we had learned along the way, and for the love that had endured despite everything. Today, as I share this story, Mira and I are building a life that we're both incredibly proud of. We've faced challenges, celebrated victories, and created memories that will last a lifetime. And through it all, we've learned that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, day after day, for the person who means the world to you. If there's one thing I hope you take away from our story, it's this: love isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. So if you ever find yourself questioning whether to hold on or let go, remember that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that take a little longer to unfold.